Elvis stopped in the middle of his song, dropped the microphone, and the silence in the 15,000-person arena was unbelievable. 15,000 people who had been screaming and cheering just seconds before suddenly found themselves holding their breath. The king of rock and roll stood motionless on stage, his sequin jumpsuit catching the spotlight as he stared into the crowd with an expression that no one in that arena had ever seen before. This wasn't the confident, charismatic Elvis they knew. This was a man who had just seen something that stopped him cold. But how did we get to this moment? What could possibly make Elvis Presley, the most electrifying performer of his generation, stop his own concert? It was August 15, 1977, just 9 days before Elvis would leave this world forever. The International Hotel in Las Vegas was packed to capacity for what would become one of the most unforgettable concerts in rock and roll history, though nobody knew it yet. Elvis had been performing his usual set, running through classics like That's All Right and Don't Be Cruel, when something in the third row caught his eye. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, a 12-year-old girl from Memphis who had been battling leukemia for 3 years. This wasn't supposed to be her night. The doctors had said she was too weak for travel, that the excitement might be too much for her fragile condition. But Sarah's mother, Margaret, couldn't bear to see her daughter's dream slip away. Elvis was Sarah's hero, her light in the darkness of hospital rooms and chemotherapy sessions. "Please, Mom," Sarah had whispered from her hospital bed just 2 days earlier. "I need to see him. I need to see Elvis." The desperation in her daughter's voice broke Margaret's heart. Against all medical advice, she packed Sarah into their old Buick and drove 8 hours straight to Las Vegas, using every penny of their savings for tickets to the show. Now Sarah sat in that third row, wearing her favorite yellow dress and a small scarf to cover her head where her hair used to be. She was crying, not from sadness, but from pure joy. She was actually here, watching Elvis Presley perform just 50 feet away from her. Elvis had been in the middle of Love Me Tender when he first noticed her. Something about the way she was watching him, the tears streaming down her young face, the way she mouthed every single word of his songs. He'd performed for millions of fans over the years, but there was something different about this little girl that reached straight into his soul. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when you break all the rules. The music stopped. Just like that. Elvis raised his hand, and his band, the Sweet Inspirations, the Memphis Boys, they all stopped playing. The entire arena fell into a shocked silence. What was happening? Was something wrong with the sound system? Was Elvis having a medical emergency? For 30 seconds that felt like an eternity, Elvis just stood there, looking directly at Sarah. The little girl stopped crying and stared back, confused but somehow understanding that this moment was meant for her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis finally spoke into his microphone, his voice softer than anyone in that arena had ever heard it. "I need to do something I've never done before." He set the microphone down on its stand and walked to the edge of the stage. The security guards didn't know what to do. This wasn't in the show plan. Elvis wasn't supposed to leave the stage during the middle of a song. But Elvis Presley wasn't asking for permission. He jumped down from the stage, landing gracefully despite his elaborate jumpsuit, and began walking through the audience. 15,000 people watched in absolute amazement as the king of rock and roll made his way through the crowd, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. People reached out to touch him, but he gently moved past them all. He had a destination, and nothing was going to stop him from reaching it. When he finally stood in front of Sarah's row, he knelt down so he was at eye level with the little girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice gentle and warm. "Sarah," she whispered, so quietly that only Elvis and her mother could hear. "Sarah, I want you to come up on stage with me. Is that okay?" The little girl nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Elvis carefully lifted her into his arms, she weighed almost nothing, and carried her back through the crowd. 15,000 people erupted into the loudest applause of the night, but Elvis wasn't performing for them anymore. He was performing for an audience of one. Subscribe and comment now. Because what Elvis did next created a moment that would echo through music history forever. Back on stage, Elvis set Sarah down gently in a chair that one of his band members had quickly brought out. He picked up his acoustic guitar, not the usual electric one he performed with, but the simple acoustic he used for his most intimate songs. "Sarah, this song is for you," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "And I want everyone here to help me sing it." What happened next was magic in its purest form. Elvis began to play "He Touched Me," a gospel song that had always held special meaning for him. But this time, he wasn't just singing it, he was living it. His voice carried every emotion he'd ever felt, every prayer he'd ever whispered, every hope he'd ever held. As the song progressed, something extraordinary began to happen in that arena. One by one, people began to join in. First it was just a few voices from the front rows. Then entire sections. By the final chorus, all 15,000 people were singing together, their voices creating a sound so beautiful, so powerful, that it seemed to lift the very roof of the International Hotel. Sarah sat in her chair on stage, no longer crying tears of joy but tears of something deeper, a moment of pure connection that transcended illness, transcended fear, transcended everything that had been weighing on her young heart. For those precious minutes, she wasn't a sick little girl. She wasn't fighting for her life. She was simply a child experiencing the most beautiful moment she could have ever imagined. But Elvis wasn't finished yet. As the song ended and the arena erupted in applause, Elvis reached into his pocket and pulled out something that would become legendary in its own right, his personal gold cross necklace, the one he wore every single day, the one that had been blessed by his beloved mother Gladys before she passed away. He walked over to Sarah and gently placed the necklace around her neck. "This is very special to me, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's protected me through everything in my life. And now I want it to protect you." The little girl looked up at him with eyes full of wonder and whispered, "Thank you, Elvis. This is the best day of my whole life." What no one in that arena knew was that this moment would change Elvis Presley forever, and the impact would reach far beyond that one magical night. Elvis helped Sarah back to her seat, but before he let her go, he whispered something in her ear that only she could hear. Years later, Sarah would reveal what he said, "You're braver than any soldier I've ever met, and stronger than any man I know. Don't you ever forget that." The concert continued, but it was different now. Elvis performed with a passion and vulnerability that even his longtime fans had never witnessed. He sang each song as if it might be his last, pouring his entire soul into every note. The audience could feel it, this wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was something sacred. After the show, Elvis did something else unprecedented. Instead of retreating to his dressing room as he always did, he spent 2 hours meeting with fans, particularly families who had children facing difficult circumstances. Word had somehow spread throughout the arena that Elvis had a special place in his heart for kids who needed hope, and he made sure to meet with as many as possible. But the story doesn't end there. Sarah Mitchell lived for 6 more months after that concert, and according to her mother, she wore Elvis's cross necklace every single day. She told everyone who would listen about the night the king of rock and roll stopped his entire show just for her. When she passed away in February of 1978, she was buried wearing that necklace, and her family says she died with a smile on her face, still talking about her special night with Elvis. Elvis Presley died just 9 days after that concert, making it one of his very last performances. But those who were there that night say something had changed in him. His final concerts were filled with a spiritual intensity that hadn't been there before. He talked more about faith, about love, about the importance of treating every person as if they mattered more than anything else in the world. The ripple effects of that single moment of compassion continue to this day. The story of Elvis and Sarah became legend among his fans. It inspired the Elvis Presley Charitable Foundation to focus specifically on helping children with serious illnesses. It led to the creation of special programs at Graceland for families dealing with medical challenges. And it became one of the most requested stories told by tour guides who share the history of the king. But perhaps most importantly, it reminded the world that behind all the glitter, the fame, and the legend, Elvis Presley was a man who understood that sometimes the most important performance of your life isn't the one that gets recorded or remembered by history. Sometimes it's the one that reaches just one person who needs to know they matter. Sarah's mother, Margaret, kept in touch with Elvis's inner circle after his death, and she shared something that Elvis's spiritual advisor later confirmed. In those final days of his life, Elvis talked constantly about Sarah and that night at the International Hotel. He said it reminded him why he started performing in the first place, not for the fame or the money, but for the moment when music becomes a bridge between human souls. Today, that gold cross necklace is part of a special memorial at Graceland, displayed alongside a photo of Elvis and Sarah on that extraordinary night. The plaque beneath it reads, "Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of being seen, being valued, and being reminded that they are never alone in their struggles." Share this story and subscribe if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives. Because in a world that often seems cold and disconnected, stories like this remind us that one moment of genuine human kindness can echo through eternity. The legacy of that night lives on in every act of unexpected kindness, in every moment when someone chooses to stop what they're doing to truly see another person's pain and respond with love. Elvis Presley may have left this world more than 4 decades ago, but the lesson he taught that night in Las Vegas remains as powerful today as it was then. We all have the power to stop our own show, reach out to someone who's hurting, and remind them that they matter more than anything else in the world. That's the real magic of Elvis Presley, not just the music, but the moments when he reminded us what it means to be truly human. Jerry Schilling, one of Elvis's closest friends, later revealed that Elvis talked about Sarah constantly in his final days. He kept saying that little girl taught him something about himself that he'd forgotten, Schilling recalled. She reminded him that the real power of music isn't in the applause, it's in the moment when it touches one person's heart so deeply that they remember they're not alone. The gold cross necklace became more than jewelry, it became a symbol of hope for families dealing with childhood illness. Margaret Mitchell received hundreds of letters from parents who found comfort in knowing that their children's struggles were seen and valued. In 1979, Margaret Mitchell established the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Children, dedicated to providing support for families dealing with pediatric cancer. The foundation's symbol was a simple gold cross, and their mission statement read, "Every child deserves to feel like they're the only person in the room who matters." Over the decades, the foundation has helped thousands of families, providing everything from financial assistance to ensuring that every child receives a special moment. The philosophy remains the same as what Elvis demonstrated that night: everyone deserves to feel seen, valued, and loved. What makes this story even more remarkable is how it has been passed down through generations. Children who were helped by the foundation grew up to become volunteers. Parents who found hope in the story of Elvis and Sarah became advocates for other families facing similar struggles. The legacy multiplied exponentially, touching lives in ways that could never have been calculated or planned. Today, the International Hotel in Las Vegas, now known as Westgate, has a permanent exhibit dedicated to that night. Visitors can see photos from the concert, read testimonials from people who were in the audience, and learn about the continuing impact of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation. The exhibit centerpiece is a recreation of the stage setup from that night, complete with the chair where Sarah sat and a replica of the gold cross necklace. But perhaps the most moving part of the exhibit is the Wall of Stories, hundreds of handwritten letters from people around the world who have been inspired by the story of Elvis and Sarah to perform their own acts of unexpected kindness. Teachers who stopped their lessons to comfort a crying student. Doctors who sat with patients long past their shifts. Strangers who helped elderly people carry groceries or listened to someone who just needed to be heard. The lesson of that night continues to echo because it speaks to something fundamental about human nature, our deep need to be seen, to matter, to know that we're not alone in our struggles. Elvis Presley, in that moment when he stopped his entire show for one little girl, demonstrated what true leadership looks like. It's not about commanding attention for yourself, it's about using whatever platform you have to lift others up, to remind them of their worth, to show them that they are precious beyond measure. As we face challenges in our own lives, as we encounter people who are struggling or in pain, the story of Elvis and Sarah reminds us that we all have the power to stop our show, to step off our stage, and to kneel down at eye level with someone who needs to know they matter. That's the real magic. Not in the performance, but in the pause. Not in the spotlight, but in the moment when we choose to share our light with someone who desperately needs it.